The Strain Season 2 premiere BKNY. Now, I believe I'm about a week or so behind. I think the third episode is actually coming on this week. I had no idea it was back on because I'm always sort of thrown off by shows off of FX, especially since they split. Like, I think I missed an entire season of, like, Archer and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia because of the FXX thing. So, I knew this was coming back on. That's why I checked recently. So I was glad I'm not too far behind. But I enjoyed this premiere. I love the start especially. I think the beginning of this episode was probably the best way to start up season 2 because we got to see what everyone was doing throughout the episode, but this really gave us like the first incarnation of the current master. We got to see the actual actor that the master or the current master is based off of. So we got to see him in his human form from years and years ago, and we got to see the actual story of how that body became the master. Because initially it was just a normal body like the other masters that we got to see in this episode. It was just a normal skinny body, and he transferred. It was like, this body that I'm in is currently frail and weak, which is kind of ironic because the human that possessed that body also had a disease. So to him, his body was frail as well. But, it's like my body's frail and weak, and it passed on. Basically, all of its essence was passed on to that body, and it transferred. And I thought that was really cool. I love the way that they told that story. And it was Stravakian. I have to see if that's the right name. Setrakian. Sorry, not Stravakian. Setrakian getting this story as a little kid. And us getting to see that play out, where it was a simple story like, we're gonna hunt this great wolf based off of legend and stuff. We believe it'll cure my brother of his illness. And then it turns out they find one of the ancient masters, and they're all killed off. It was fairly gruesome. One person had his head completely decapitated. They made like a blood trail. The other person had like part of his head bashed off, and then the brother of the master was like being eaten, and part of his head was gone, and blood was being sucked out of him. So, very gruesome beginning, but it was really cool. I love the way that they played that. And it's like, here's the actual actor, which I never even thought of, the fact that the face is based off of somebody. But, we got to see him, and we got to see how he became the master. And we really got our first step into kind of an actual process of this character, where something from his actual life kind of transferred over when he was changed into one of the vampires, and that was his love for children. Because initially, they mentioned like his ailment is kind of what made him realize the usefulness of life, and so he would just throw out candy to kids and stuff, and he was nice to everyone. And then after he changed, he would basically sap that youth from the children, and we got to see that. It really came around at the very end of the episode. So I love the way that they did that. I thought that was really a really interesting step, and it was, they took all these children from the school for the blind, and they turned them into these monsters, and they actually chose Kelly to be the one to control all of these, child monsters, and it's because of her connection to her son, because she is the mother character. And of course, I'm sure there are like a billion other mothers in there, but obviously she's involved with the main character, so that's why it matters. But I love the way that that played out, and it's like they took the children, they changed them, and so we have these new forms of monsters, and they're also different because they're all blind children. And it could have just been the scene that they had, but it looked like the one that they really focused on didn't have eyes at all. After the change, it looked like two completely black spots, like they took the eyes out. And he does call them feelers. I can't think of the guy's name, but the German guy, he calls them feelers because they don't have eyes, they can't actually see. And I don't think it would matter. I assume it would be about the same. Maybe they wouldn't be able to, I guess, use their pincers or whatever you would actually call them to attack people if they can't see. But they could still get close enough to be able to know where they are and hear them, and use their other senses to tell where people are. So I think that was an interesting concept, how it ended, where she's brought back at least somewhat to a state of consciousness where she only says two words, and they're both Zach. So she still has the connection to her son, and we'll have to see exactly how all that plays out. And I'm assuming it can't really be good because she's been turned, unfortunately. So we'll see how all that plays out when she does finally come in contact with them. And of course, we knew that this was going to happen. I didn't expect her to come back in such an important way, which was really cool because I really thought they would kind of save her for like, all right, we need to mess with you, and so she gets like an episode where she's important. But now she has like a set role, and she's kind of the third in command when you think about it. You have the master, then you have the German guy, and so now we have Kelly, who actually does have a prominent role in this war now, having control over these children. So she's gonna be much more prominent in this season. So I really like that actually. She's gonna be just as important in this season as she was in last season, and possibly more so because the dynamic of her having been turned already. So she's technically an enemy to them, but it's not the same thing, and she'll still have her a level of consciousness where she can talk to them, and she won't want to do what she's doing, but ultimately they'll have mental control over her, so that she to force her to control the children, or just to force her to attack F and everybody else, and of course attack her son. So I love the way that they did that, where they've made her very prominent as far as an antagonist, who is of course like in this middle zone where she's forced to be one, although she doesn't want to be. So I love that they're taking it that route, and I can't wait to see how that plays out for her character and how long she really lasts before she does get killed off. I feel like that's the only ending for her character, is that she won't last as this sort of in between antagonist for the rest of the series. I think it might end in this season, and she might survive until possibly season 3. But I don't know. I think it's an interesting route for her character. I'm definitely excited for that. Another really cool thing we got to see was Setrakian actually met the other masters, which was pretty cool, and he ran into the other guy. I was like, as soon as they pulled the hood off, I'm like, they're gonna recognize each other. He's like, oh, I know this guy. So they met each other again, and then Setrakian met the other. He met like the group of people that are able to somehow separate. I would assume it's because of the masters. We also find out that they all have specific powers, and the master that they're fighting against is the main villain of the series. His power is actually like to block people from being able to see, or to really block the other masters from being able to see what he's doing. And when he was wounded, he lost control, and so that's why they were able to capture Setrakian and bring him to the lair and say like, hey, you find him, let us know, because we all have the same enemy technically. So I thought that was definitely cool. It was a much smaller moment than I was expecting. It was kind of like, we captured you, this is the plan, leave. And he didn't mention it to anyone else. When he comes back, it's like, don't worry, don't bother yourself with worrying and stuff like that. It was just like, all this stuff happened, and he was just like, I was gone, and that was it. So they still, no one else in the group knows exactly what he went through, which I find kind of funny. He was just like, kept it all to himself. But he saw them feed, and he told the other guy, and I love the line he gave. He was like, as you walk through the daylight, never forget this moment. Like, they might be helping you now, but this is kind of what they are. So don't forget this moment. And they kind of just had to watch them eat this random guy, and I was like, man, that kind of sucks. I was just in my head, I'm like, I had to like make up a story like, this guy was just a villain. He was a bad guy. Because it's just this random dude out of nowhere. Like, they just chain him down, and it's like, alright, go ahead, you guys wake up, and here's your meal. So they're like scratching him and eating him and stuff, and they just have to watch as this guy's being torn apart. And that's kind of where it ends off there, which I thought was fairly abrupt. Like, we didn't even get to see, even after Setrakian left, we didn't get to see what was happening with them. So that kind of sucked, because I love that storyline, because I still want the answers as to how those 4 people, or it's either 4 or 5, but how that little group is able to separate, which I guess was because of the other masters at this point, because they were able to fight against the other one. Like, alright, well, typically he has control, mind control over everyone, but you 4, you 5 are, working for us, so we'll separate you from that. That way you can keep control and you help us, and, instead of helping him and being controlled by him. But still technically no official answer just yet, but still definitely really cool. So I love getting to see them. Hopefully they'll be in the next episode a little bit more, next couple episodes. But that was really cool. Then we have basically the whole base. Everyone's kind of just doing their own thing. We got like, the woman who basically just took down the entire internet. She's working on something, just she doesn't know what it is until she finishes it. So she's working on something now and fixing things up. We got, I can't remember like anyone's names outside of like F and Nora and Zach. Like the other two, I just can't remember them. But the guy who typically fights the rats, he's boarding up the place and security and stuff like that. And his plan is to just go building by building during the day, just defend the entire place as long and fight as long as possible. So that's his plan. They're building stuff up. F and Nora are trying to biologically tackle the situation because that's kind of what they know. And I love that. I thought that was actually cool because they didn't do that at all last season. It was kind of just like, we're in a mess. We got to fight. So it was cool to see them have this moment where it's like everything they fought for leading up to them attacking the Master at the end of last season, it was like, well, that's not our plan anymore because he's affected by sunlight, but he doesn't die. So they have to come up with something else. And I love that idea. It was like their whole episode is like they're just going through trying to figure out like, all right, this is what happens. Instead of like most viruses, it kills the host before it turns them instead of affecting them and then killing them afterwards because it hurts so much or whatever. It's the opposite. Having to figure out like, what exactly do we do to combat this? So I loved it, and it's like their idea was to infect the strain itself and take out the vampires and do it in sort of like a middle ground so it affects them but it doesn't wipe them out so that they can cure them of vampirism and turn everyone human again. And of course by the end they find two random people who get attacked and it's like, alright, these are our guinea pigs right now. This is what we need. Like, we need these two people to try to cure them. So hopefully that works, not only for the sake of the group, but for those two people who are guaranteed to die if this fails. Hopefully that all works out. I'm really excited to see that, actually. I don't know why, but like, I guess because it's their, that's what they do, is kind of their playground, is this biological state. We finally get to see that now because we didn't really get to see it, except for the very beginning of the series. And now that's what they have to do. That's their only plan, outside of just sheer action and silver grenades and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to see how long it takes them to master it, if they even can, or if they come up with like sort of a pseudo cure or something like that. Maybe they can't change people back, but it kind of they chemically find a way to separate the vampires from the mind control like the other group. And so they make more people like that, even though they aren't technically cured. So, however that plays out, I'm really curious to see what they end up doing, whether or not they can save this couple, and just how all that plays out. And maybe they can get some help from that book that Setrakian was reading from, because they have like diagrams of like the body and like the pincer and everything like that. So it seemed like that's going to be a really huge help for them. And also, of course, all the weapons that were in the little storage unit. You have, the silver grenades and all sorts of other stuff in wooden boxes. I saw like a sword that was in there. It looked like an ancient sword that you'd like, like some Excalibur stuff you like pull out of a stone. It didn't look as cool because it was like just black stone. But he had like old swords in there. It looked like the first box I think F opened was just clips for different types of weapons or something. So they have a ton of new weapons, or at least a big stock of weapons and ammo and stuff like that. So that's really cool if they have to actually go out and fight. So that was nice to see. I'd love to see them pull out some other ancient weapons. I mean, we got to see more use out of the cane that Setrakian has, like the silver cane, which was formerly owned by the Master himself, which I thought was pretty cool. It was like owned by the human version, and that's how it really got passed down. So I thought that was cool. So we got to see more use out of that. The cool little action scene in the storage unit was pretty sweet, especially the second time the lights went off, and it made me think of a video game a little, like just running through a dark hall and shooting and using the gun as your sort of source of light. So I thought that was really cool. It made me think, like, how far did F turn it when he turned the lights back on? It was like he turned it, and then it went off like a minute later. Like show-wise, it went off like a minute later or something. So I thought that was kind of funny. Like, how far did he turn that thing before he took off running? But it was a really cool scene. They're chopping heads off and stuff like that. Like, I think there were like 5 decapitations in that one alone. It was a nice little action scene to end the episode. But it was a really good start. Like I said, I love the beginning. I thought it was a great beginning to the episode, getting that story. The Master's talking about he needs a new body, so it was kind of a cool way to introduce the fact that that's how the current body came in, and now he's looking for yet another body because his current one has been scarred by the sun. Kelly's been chosen for the children. You know, we got a new form of monsters in general, so who knows how that's going to play out. They might be faster because they're younger, stuff like that. Might not be as susceptible, or they might be even weaker because they aren't as strong, you know, to the sunlight and stuff like that. So balances like speed and strength versus being affected by the weaknesses that the others have, like the silver and things like that. The older guy is buying property and saying like, oh, we're helping out the city and stuff like that. I don't know if he's getting this woman killed or what, but he has her work. He wants her as his assistant now, so she's gonna be working for him. She got him the land deal. It used to be an old soap factory, so whatever this liquid stuff is, I don't know what that's gonna be at all. But he mentioned like, is it gonna move, or at least the German guy did, can it move like a lot of liquid stuff? So I don't know exactly what that is. If it's just gonna be, he said liquid, but it was just gonna be like the dirt with the worms and stuff in it, or if it's gonna be like in the beginning of the episode where the Master like just grossly vomits a bunch of stuff out, which was nasty. Wasn't as nasty as it could have been, I think, because it was all CG, so they didn't use like an actual like spray thing to just shoot random gross looking liquid and fake worms out. It was like all CG, so that's why it didn't look as gross as other stuff does when they do fake vomit. It was all like CG worms and stuff, so I was like, well, it's not as bad. It still looked gross, but not as bad as it could have been. But they got this property. She's probably getting screwed by working for him, thinking like, oh, 3 times my pay and this and that. And who knows what's going to end up happening to her. But I definitely enjoyed this episode. I think the stuff with Kelly was really great, so I'm excited to see her role throughout the rest of the season. Everyone kind of had a good moment in this episode. Even Zach had a moment, you know, him dealing with the loss of his mother and how his father, you know, was being a father. He was kind of saying like, oh, she's just sick and stuff like that. And now it's kind of biting him in the butt because the last thing he did was, you know, he shot at his wife, and so his son doesn't fully understand exactly what's going on. So I like that moment. It actually made a lot of sense. I thought it was pretty cool. So I'm excited for the rest of the season. Of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this premiere, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I definitely want to know what you guys thought about the very beginning and very end of this episode, because we had the story of the Master, or the current body of the Master, and in the very end we got Kelly being a new sort of lieutenant within the war as a villain. So 2 really cool moments, especially the ending being very important for the rest of the series. The beginning was just a cool story to me, but like I said, I want to know what you guys thought about those 2 moments, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.